The tutorial section of this video starts at approximately 4 minutes in, which tells you how to make this work for your own player heads and your own skins. But before that is quite important information, so make sure you watch it all. Hello and welcome to another Minecraft Bedrock Edition add-on showcase and tutorial all about player heads. And I'm going to give you a very quick demonstration about what this does. First, I have here a friend and a very sharp sword, and if I give my friend a whack with the very sharp sword, he will drop his head, which I can then pick up, put it in my pocket and place down elsewhere. That's basically how this works. And for the sake of demonstration, if I give my friend this big sharp sword and get him to chop me, you'll see that I also drop my head. When I respawn, you'll see my head is now on the floor. Now, before you all get carried away, run to the download section on my website. I will say a few things, a few words of warning, if you like. Chances are, if you're here, you have seen the player head drops on something like Hermitcraft or from the Vanilla Tweaks website. And on that, what happens is you put on whatever skin you want, you get chopped with a sword, or you die and your head will drop based on what skin you're using. That works great on Java Edition, but this is Minecraft Bedrock Edition. And as of right now, while I've made this pack, it is impossible to get the player skin or the player name as part of add-ons, so this is a manually edited pack. You will have to do some work in order to get this pack to work for you. The things to note are that once you have this pack enabled and working, changing your skin in-game to something else will not affect it. It will still drop the original skin. Demonstrating that again, there you go. You can see I dropped the skin I had on previously. Another thing to note is that this will not work with the custom skin editor. If you've used this custom skin editor inside of the game to create your profile picture, it won't work. It will only work with classic Minecraft skin files that you have a texture file for. Also, to get this to work, you are going to need to have access to commands, which means on a realm or single player, you're going to need cheats enabled, and on a server, you'll need access to the server console, which does mean that achievements will be turned off for your world when there's absolutely nothing I can do about that, because this is a behavior pack, so that means they're going to be turned off anyway. So please don't be spamming in my comments. Can you change it to make it not turn off achievements, or can you make it so it uses any skin? If I could do this better than it currently is, then I absolutely would. And one last thing to get off my chest before we get into how this works and what you need to do to make it work for you, and that is that these are not blocks, these are entities, and as such we can use my dies in order to rotate them and change them and move them and things like that. And the reason that they are using entities and not blocks is that the mini blocks are still hidden behind experimental mode, which means they don't work on realms and servers. I only create add-ons that work in the stable release of Minecraft, which means these have to be entities. It also means that we can do things like changing the size of them and position of them and rotating them, which you just would not be able to do if these were made of blocks. So in the future, we may end up using blocks so you can put them on your head. But right now, these are not blocks. These are entities. You can't put them on your head, but you can, if you're not holding a die that changes them, you can sit on them. And last but not least, before we get into it, there's one question I always get asked when I do these types of videos, and that is, how do you pick them up? I can't pick them up. You have to shift, which means crouching, and right click on them. So basically shift and right click, and that will pick them up. To place them, it's just normal click. And the reason for that is that if you click on them normally, you're just going to end up sitting on them. So you need to shift so that you can pick them up. Right, let's get into how it works and what you need to do to make it work for you, basically to get your textures into it. Okay, so once you've downloaded the pack from FoxyNoTail.com, you should end up with a folder which inside it has two more folders. One is playerheads_B and one is playerheads_R. The B is the behavior pack part of the add-on, and the R is the resource pack part of the add-on, and it's the R where we're going to be spending most of our time. Now, this pack is currently set up to allow up to 10 players. Now, I will show you later on how you can add more than 10 players, but at the moment, it's really easy to add in 10 players. All you've got to do is go into the resource pack folder, go into the textures folder, and you will see there are two more folders, one called players, which you will put your skin files inside of, and one called items, which is basically the item that the player holds in its hand that represents the player head. So what we're going to do is start from the beginning and add in a couple of players to this. So like I said, into the resource packs folder, into the textures folder, and into the players folder. And we're going to replace player 1 and player 2 with the skins that we want to show up for those players. So first things first, you'll notice I have a folder here with lots of different skins inside, and I want myself to be player 1. So I'm going to drag myself into the players folder, and I'm going to rename it to player 1, which means I do need to delete this one so that there aren't two files with the same name. So I'll select that and delete it and just rename my skin to player 1. Next, I want Big Chicken to be player 2, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to drag his skin into this folder here. I'm going to delete the player 2 one, and I'm going to rename it to player 2. If your skin is pretty old school like this Steve one here, it will only be 32 by 64, so you need to fix it in order to make it work. So in order to do that, I like to use Photoshop, but there are a million other photo or picture editing programs and apps out there for both Windows and mobile devices. I'm sure you can find one that you can do this in, and all we're going to do is we're going to drag in our skin that's the wrong size, and we're going to stretch it. In Photoshop, the easiest way to do that is to go to Image and then Canvas Size. And what I'm going to do is just extend the canvas of this to make it 64 by 64. But it's really important that Steve goes into the top left corner. If he's down here, it's not going to work. We need him to be in the top left corner. Then we can save that, which will overwrite the original file. So when we go back to look at our folders, it's the right size. It doesn't need to have anything underneath this, because it's only the head and the hat part that this pack is looking at. So that's the heads themselves textured, but as you can see in our hands, we've still got the numbers 1 and 2 rather than any sort of graphic for those, which is a bit weird, and it still just says player 1 and player 2. Let's make the items in our hands look like we want them to, and let's make it so that when we hold them in our hands, it says the right names instead of player 1 and player 2. How hard could it be? So coming back to our folder, we're now going to go out of the players folder and into the items folder, and we're going to re-texture these items. Using Photoshop again, or Paint, or the photo editor of your choice, I'm going to bring in my player 1 skin, which is me, and I'm going to zoom right in, and I'm just going to highlight the face, which is an 8 by 8 pixel area. And now I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to make a new document, which is 16 pixels by 16 pixels high. So 16 by 16 pixels is how big a standard item in Minecraft is, and I'm going to paste my face into there, and you can see it doesn't quite take up the whole page. Now, what I'm going to do is remove the background, so I've got a transparent background, and now I can save that as the item number 1. So if I navigate to the correct directory and make sure I'm selected as a PNG, I'm going to just click on player 1 and I'm going to overwrite it by clicking save, clicking yes to replace it, and then clicking OK on the format options. And now that will come up as the item in my hand. Let's go back into the game and check it out. And by doing that, you can see I've now got a FoxyNoTail head for number 1 and still a number 2 for Big Chicken. So I've got to do exactly the same thing for Big Chicken skin next. The other way we could do this is we could actually take the player 2 file that's already there into Photoshop and edit it. So let's do that. So by dragging it in, I can load that up to edit it. And now all I need to do is get Big Chicken skin. Again, I'm going to highlight his face and I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to paste it into that one there. And then I can just click save. Make sure that we're on the right format. It needs to be a PNG or it won't work. And then click save, overwrite it, and then choose, I use smallest file size on the format options. It really doesn't matter. You can choose whichever one you want. And now we have Big Chicken as the player 2. So now that we've done that, now we want to actually change what it says when we hold the item in our hand. So we're going to go back to the main resource pack folder. We're going to go into texts and we're going to click on the es_us lang file. This file basically tells the game what to call the standard name for the entity. So the entity we're holding in our hand. So the item's actual name is item.spawnegg.entity.fph:player1.name, which is a bit of a mouthful. So we're going to change that to FoxyNoTail. And I'm also going to change the bit underneath where it says player 1 to FoxyNoTail as well. And I'm going to change player 2 to Big Chicken. In fact, I'm actually going to change it to Big Chicken's head because it's technically his head that we're going to be holding. So if I copy and paste that there as well and save that file, now when we go back into the game, we should see that they're called something else. And there we go. Now you can see when I hold my head, it says FoxyNoTail, and when I hold the number 2, it says Big Chicken's head. And if I hold them in my inventory like this, you can see it changes as well. Now what we need to do is actually assign these to a player. So now we've got our textures in and the text saying the right thing. Now what we need to do is actually link those to ourselves. So as standard, if I kill Big Chicken, he doesn't drop anything at all, and the same will happen if he kills me. This is where needing commands comes in, which means you're going to have to enable cheats in your world settings. If you're on a realm, there is a little toggle switch just here on the main page, and if you're in a single player world, it is in your game settings. However, if you're on a server, you can do it from the command console without having to enable cheats on your world. So for each player, we need to give them a unique tag, and those tags are basically the word player and then a number from 1 to however many players you've got. So for myself, I'm going to be player 1, so I'm going to do tag @s, which is myself, add player 1. So now I'm tagged as player 1, so when Big Chicken kills me, it's going to drop whatever texture is set to player 1. I'm going to do the same thing for Big Chicken, tag Big Chicken, but I'm going to add player 2 instead. So now that when I kill Big Chicken, he will drop his head. If I didn't give Big Chicken the player 2 tag and I gave him the same as me like this, then when I kill him, he's actually going to drop my head instead. So the tag is what tells the game which texture to use for you. So if you've got 10 players, each player needs to be tagged differently. So you would tag your 3rd player, player 3, and your 4th player, player 4, all the way up to however many players you've got. Now, this pack currently has the capacity for 10 players. Looking back at the texture files, you can see there are 10 spaces for 10 different players. But if you need more than that, I'm going to show you how to add as many as you want. In order to add more than 10 players, we're going to need to edit things in both the behavior pack and the resource pack this time. So in this side, I'm going to open the behavior pack, and in this side, I'm going to open the resource pack. The folder structures might look relatively similar, but in the behavior pack, that's actually going to control what entities exist. And in the right-hand side, in the resource pack, it's going to control how those entities look. So we're going to start with the behavior pack, and we're going to go into the entities folder. And you can see we've got player 1 all the way through to player 10. If you want more, if you need 15, 20, 30, 40, you're going to have to add more of these for each player. So let's add one for an 11th player. I'm going to copy this file and just paste it inside there, and I'm going to rename it to player 11. I'm now going to open up this file inside of my favorite editor, which is Notepad++, and I'm going to have to change a couple of things in here. One of them is the identifier needs to be changed from player 10 to player 11. And if we scroll down to where the loot table is, and the easiest way to do that is to use the find function, just type in loot and it'll take you to where the loot table is. We're going to need to change that to look at the player 11 loot table instead. Those are the only two things we need to change from that file, so we can save that and close that. Next, we're going to hop out of this entities folder and we're going to go into the loot tables folder. We're going to need to do exactly the same thing. You can see we've got players 1 to 10 there, and we need to make one for player 11. So we're going to copy and paste player 10 and rename it to player 11. And then open that up in your notepad again and just change this line here where it is the ID to player 11. Remember, you need to do this for every single player you're adding. So if you're adding 30 players, you're going to need to do this for every single one, adding one to this on each one as you go. Save that and then close it. And that's pretty much it for the behavior pack side of things. Now on the resource pack side of things, there's a couple extra things we need to do other than adding more textures. First of all, we're going to go into the entity folder and we're going to do the same thing we just did over here. We're going to copy and paste player 10 and we're going to rename it to player 11. And we're going to open this up in our text editor, and there's a few extra bits we need to change in this one. Again, we need to change the identifier to number 11, and we need to change the texture to link to player 11 as well. We also need to change the spawn egg texture to player 11. That is the item we hold in our hand. And that is it for that file. So there's three things: the identifier, the texture, and the spawn egg texture. So we can save and close that one. And then hopping out of that folder and going into our text folder and our enuslang file again, we then need to add language lines in for each of the new players as well. So copy and paste the last line And this time, anywhere where there is a 10, so player 10 there, player 10 there, and player 10 there, and player 10 there, we're going to change to player 11. We also need to copy and paste this here, this action lines, which is basically when you sit on the entity, it will say press jump to exit. We need to change, or we need to add another line in for that for player 11 as well. Bear in mind, if your player 11 is called John or Craig or Sally or whoever, you can change these here to actually put the actual player's gamer tag in there rather than it just saying player 11. And you need to do this for every new player you're adding. So if you're adding 30 players, it might take you a little bit of time. Once you've added everything you need to add in there, you can save that and close that file. And then all you're left to do is add in extra textures and then change the texture files. So first of all, you'll need to go into your players folder and you're going to need to add in all of the extra textures. Make sure you call them player 11, player 12, player 13, and so on and so forth. And the same thing with your items. Make sure you add in items for each of those. If a spawn egg doesn't have the corresponding item that it's looking for, it may crash your game when it tries to load it. Then you need to go into your item texture file, and you need to add in the extra ones here. Now you can see I've conveniently already added up to 30 in there for you. If you're adding more than 30 players, you need to add a few extra lines in there. And then you need to go into your textures_list file and do the same thing in there. And again, I've already added up to 30 in here for you. If you need more than 30 player heads, then you will need to add more lines. But this time there's two sets. So you need to add extra in below player 30 here for the players folder. And then you need to add more than 30 in here in the items section as well. And this just tells the game where all of the actual texture files are. Once you've updated those, that is everything. You're good to go. And then all of your player heads should link. Then literally all you're left to do is just tag all of your players until they're all tagged. And they should all drop their unique heads. Whew. So there is a lot to do. This is by no means an automatic process, and I really, really wish it was. I really wish there was an easy way to actually get this player's skin file that they're wearing into the game and just drop that when you kill the player. But there isn't, and there's no way of making these into blocks just yet. That will come in the future once the experimental features make it into stable release instead of being hidden behind the experimental toggles. So yeah, keep your eye out, and don't forget, this pack will need updating with each version of Minecraft. So every time there's a new version of Minecraft, I'm going to have to update this pack because it uses the player entity file. So you need to download it to your world all over again. When I release a new version of this pack, chances are all I'm going to be changing is this player.json file here in the entity folder. If we open that up, this is the standard vanilla Minecraft player entity file that controls how the player works. And all that's in it is these lines here in order to make it look for a file that controls what happens when the player dies. So in future, I'm just going to probably update this file. So then you'll be able to drag that file into your existing pack folder. And as long as you update the universal unique identifiers, which are in the manifest, then your pack should work properly. Now, a word of warning here, these UUID numbers and version numbers are really important, that every time you make a change to your pack, you need to update those, particularly if you're using this on a realm or a server, because otherwise your server mates are not going to be given the latest version of the pack, and they're going to see all of the old textures. If you want advice or help or a tutorial on how to do that, I have an add-ons tutorial video that goes through all of those sorts of things in a great deal of detail. The link is in the description below. So there you go. That is it from me and Big Chicken. I know this pack's not perfect, but it's as good as it's going to be for now. And I really hope you enjoy it. And I hope you have a great time manipulating this pack and adding in all of the details for each of your players so that you can play it on your single player worlds, your realms, and your servers. Anyway, I'm going to say thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do leave a like. And if you haven't already, please do consider subscribing. And hopefully I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!